The morning fog still clung to the sprawling grounds of Blackridge Military Academy when Maya Torres stepped off the shuttle, her duffel bag swinging lightly from her shoulder. The cadets standing near the main gate didn't pay much attention at first, assuming she was just another civilian transfer, maybe a timid girl who had been admitted under some scholarship program. Maya's expression was calm, almost serene, her brown eyes scanning the campus without revealing much. She carried herself with a subtle confidence, but it wasn't the kind that demanded attention. It was the kind that made others notice anyway. Cadet Commander Brooks, a tall, broad-shouldered boy with a permanent scowl etched into his face, noticed her immediately. He nudged his friend and whispered, "Look at the new girl. Bet she'll break on the first obstacle, probably scared out of her mind." His voice carried the casual arrogance of someone who had spent too many months at the top of the cadet hierarchy. Around them, whispers spread like wildfire as other cadets caught sight of Maya. Some speculated about her background. Others joked quietly that she looked too fragile to survive even the most basic drills. Maya didn't respond. She didn't laugh or frown, didn't shrink or swagger. She simply moved forward, adjusting the strap of her duffel and keeping her eyes on the path ahead. She noted the layout, the placement of obstacles, and the cadets who lingered near the shadows observing her. Everything, the way the seniors grouped, the small hierarchies within the clusters, the subtle exchanges of glances, was recorded silently in her mind. This was the kind of information that mattered. Every detail could reveal someone's character, and every character revealed their intentions through actions more than words. Inside her duffel were nothing extraordinary, a few changes of clothes, a small journal, and a tactical watch. To anyone else, it looked ordinary. To Maya, it was all she needed for observation and planning. She had learned long ago that appearances were deceptive. She was here for a purpose that went beyond training or academics. Her real assignment was undercover, assessing the academy's culture and the behavior of cadets who had, in the past, escalated into toxic patterns of hazing and intimidation. The administration had asked for someone who could both observe and intervene if necessary. They had asked for a Navy SEAL. Maya paused at the steps leading to the main dormitory building. She glanced up at the flagpole, the American flag fluttering in the cold morning breeze, then looked back down at her shoes. She breathed in, steadying herself, but not because she was afraid. She was already calculating. How would the cadets react? Which ones were likely to test her? Who would be the first to make a move? Her calm exterior masked a mind constantly at work, analyzing probabilities and potential outcomes with the precision of someone who had been trained to survive in hostile environments. As she ascended the steps, a group of cadets lounged near the entrance. Brooks was among them, his posture loose but his eyes sharp. He called out, "Hey, new girl, you lost or just scared to join the real cadets?" The others snickered. Maya stopped, tilted her head slightly, and smiled faintly. It wasn't a smile of warmth or friendliness. It was a smile that acknowledged their attempt to intimidate without revealing anything about herself. Brooks stepped forward, towering over her, his grin widening. "Don't worry, we'll show you the ropes, but first, how strong are you really?" He raised an eyebrow as if daring her to answer. Maya's gaze remained steady. "I'll figure that out soon enough," she said softly, her voice measured, confident, but entirely unreadable. The small, controlled tone was enough to unsettle Brooks. He wasn't used to being met with calm rather than fear or subservience. The cadets around him whispered among themselves, unsure if she was joking or serious. Inside the dormitory, Maya's presence caused a ripple effect. She checked into the temporary room assigned to her, taking careful note of the room layout, exit routes, and even the placement of security cameras. Every observation had a purpose. Even the most mundane details, like the way the air conditioning vent rattled or how the lights flickered, could be useful. She set her duffel beside the bed, then walked to the mirror. She studied her reflection, adjusting her posture, her expression neutral. To the outside world, she was just another cadet. But behind those eyes was a reservoir of experience and lethal skill honed over years in covert operations. Later, during orientation, the seniors circulated, giving the usual introductions, cracking jokes, and asserting dominance over the newcomers. Brooks made sure to hover near Maya, testing her reactions with casual insults and sly remarks. "So, you ready for the obstacle course? Or do you want us to carry you there?" he said, chuckling. Maya simply nodded politely, taking notes on his tone, timing, and body language. To the casual observer, she appeared compliant, even timid. In reality, she was calculating every step, every angle, every possible scenario. Her training as a SEAL gave her an unusual perspective. She could anticipate human behavior with unnerving accuracy. Even in this supposedly controlled environment of Blackridge Academy, she treated each interaction as a mission. Identify threats, gather intel, and plan contingencies. And she quickly realized that Brooks and his clique weren't just brash, they were dangerous in their arrogance. They thrived on intimidation and exclusion, and no one had ever stood up to them in the way Maya silently intended to. By evening, she had mapped out the likely routines of the senior cadets. She knew when they would train, when they would eat, and when they would linger in the shadows waiting for the new cadets to slip up. She had already determined where the most likely areas of harassment could occur. For a casual observer, it might have seemed like she was simply adjusting to a new school, but she was already laying the groundwork for the confrontation that would come, and she knew it would come sooner than they expected. As lights dimmed in the dormitory, Maya sat on her bed quietly, reviewing the day's events in her mind. She wrote brief notes in her journal, careful not to leave evidence for anyone else to find. She reflected on the cadets' personalities, their weaknesses, and the group dynamics. She smiled faintly, recalling Brooks' overconfident smirk. Little did he know, the new girl he planned to humiliate was not only prepared but already steps ahead. She had survived missions in hostile territory, faced threats far deadlier than a group of arrogant cadets, and she was ready for anything. By the time the lights went out, Maya Torres had become more than just a new cadet. She had become a shadow in their midst, observing, calculating, waiting. And when the cadets finally realized the truth, it would be too late. The quiet girl they dismissed would reveal her real identity, and nothing would ever be the same again. The morning sun spilled across the Blackridge Academy grounds, glinting off polished boots and freshly swept paths. Maya Torres stepped onto the training field, her duffel slung across her back, blending in with the other cadets. To anyone glancing her way, she appeared cautious but determined, moving with a deliberate, measured pace. Yet every step, every slight adjustment in posture, reflected the quiet awareness of someone trained to anticipate danger before it materialized. Cadet Commander Brooks, looming over a group of his friends, watched her closely. "Here she comes," he whispered, voice dripping with amusement. "Let's see how fast she breaks." His smirk widened as he motioned to the others. "Make her first day interesting." The group snickered, casually falling into formation around her path, a predatory circle. Their plan was simple: push the new girl physically, intimidate her verbally, and watch her crumble. None suspected that Maya had already calculated the probability of every scenario. The morning drills began with running laps, stretching, and push-ups. Brooks approached casually, pretending to supervise. "You keeping up, new girl?" he taunted, his voice carrying just enough to draw the attention of nearby cadets. Maya offered a small nod, neither confirming nor denying her capabilities. She slowed her pace just enough to appear tentative, allowing Brooks to believe she was struggling. Inside, her heart rate was steady, her focus sharp. She was studying him as much as he was studying her. The subtle flex of his jaw, the twitch of his hand, the way he coordinated the other cadets around him. Every detail mattered. By mid-morning, Brooks decided to escalate. During a series of agility drills, he bumped her shoulder lightly, testing her reaction. "Careful or you'll faceplant on the next obstacle," he said with a laugh. Maya's expression didn't change. She caught the movement of his hand, the slight imbalance in his stance, the rhythm of the other cadets' footsteps around her. Instead of reacting impulsively, she adjusted her own footing, letting him think he had gained an advantage. To him, she was still the timid new girl he could manipulate. The first real test came at the climbing wall. Maya approached with slow, careful steps, her hands brushing over the grip points. Brooks followed closely behind, smirking. "Need a hand? Or do you want me to watch you embarrass yourself?" he teased. Maya looked up at the wall, sizing each hold, her mind tracing her movements. With a faint smile, she began the climb. Her pace was steady, deliberate, seemingly cautious. But every movement was precise, controlled, almost imperceptibly powerful. Within moments, she had reached the top and descended gracefully, drawing only polite nods from instructors who assumed her technique was beginner level. Brooks, however, was not convinced. He decided to push further, testing her endurance. "All right, new girl," he said loudly. "Let's see how long you can last on the obstacle course. No shortcuts. Let's see what you've got." He gestured to a particularly grueling set of walls, rope swings, and balance beams. The other cadets gathered around, whispering bets and laughing quietly, eager to watch what they assumed would be a spectacle. Maya's calm demeanor remained unbroken. She nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the challenge, and stepped forward. What happened next unsettled them more than anything they had anticipated. Maya moved across the course with an almost unnatural fluidity. Her jumps were measured, landing solidly and quietly. Her grips were firm but precise. She navigated balance beams with a confidence that belied her new girl image. Brooks tried to follow her lead, pushing faster, mocking her movements. "Slow down, you're embarrassing yourself," he yelled, but Maya's focus never wavered. Every obstacle she conquered with controlled effort, every movement calculated to conserve energy while demonstrating skill. By midday, Brooks realized something unusual was happening. The new girl he expected to falter had outlasted him in nearly every drill. His ego bristled, but his pride prevented him from admitting defeat. Instead, he resorted to verbal intimidation. "You think you're better than us, huh? Just wait until tonight. We've got something special planned for you," he said, his tone a mix of threat and bravado. Maya, unflinching, responded only with a slight tilt of her head. Her silence was unsettling. It implied awareness, intelligence, and patience far beyond that of any ordinary cadet. Throughout the afternoon, she observed as Brooks and his clique demonstrated their hierarchy, asserting dominance over other cadets. Maya noted patterns: who followed orders without question, who tried to mediate, and who reveled in cruelty. She cataloged every insult, shove, and sarcastic remark, mentally preparing for the inevitable confrontation. She didn't need to react immediately. Patience, she had learned long ago, was often the most potent weapon. By letting the bullies underestimate her, she gained not only the element of surprise, but also a detailed understanding of their weaknesses. During lunch, the cadets clustered in their usual spots. Brooks sat at the head of a table, recounting minor humiliations he had inflicted on past newcomers. "She's probably shivering in her room right now," he boasted to the group. Maya sat alone, observing quietly. Her gaze flicked from one cadet to another, noting alliances, rivalries, and body language. Every word spoken by Brooks and his clique became evidence, every smirk and glance a clue. By the end of lunch, she had a mental map of their personalities, weaknesses, and the likely methods they would use to intimidate her further. After lunch, training continued with a mock tactical exercise. Maya stayed within the bounds of normal cadet ability, deliberately allowing minor mistakes to appear as inexperience. Brooks, growing increasingly frustrated, attempted to corner her during a simulated capture drill. "Gotcha now, new girl," he shouted. Maya's response was subtle but decisive. With a slight shift in weight and a quick adjustment of her stance, she escaped his grasp without him noticing how effortlessly she had moved. He stumbled, his face turning red as he tried again, only to fail repeatedly. The other cadets exchanged confused glances, realizing something about her didn't add up. By late afternoon, Brooks was seething. He had underestimated her from the start, and the longer he watched, the clearer it became that this timid new girl was far from ordinary. He decided that tonight he would ensure she learned her place. No more testing, no more guesses. But Maya's calm smile never wavered. She already knew what was coming. And while the seniors planned their trap, she was planning hers. mentally preparing for the moment when the illusion would break, and they would realize the truth about the girl they had underestimated. As evening approached, Maya returned to her room, her journal open on the bed. She reviewed her mental notes from the day, writing down observations about every cadet she had interacted with. Brooks' aggression, the clique's groupthink, the minor acts of cruelty she had seen, all would be important for tomorrow. She didn't feel fear, only anticipation. She understood fully the dynamics of power and the dangerous arrogance of those around her. By staying quiet and observant today, she had already gained the upper hand. And tomorrow, when the trap was sprung, the cadets would discover that their new girl was no ordinary trainee. The night fell silently over Blackridge Military Academy. The moon cast long shadows across the training grounds, masking movements in darkness. In her room, Maya lay on her bed, reviewing scenarios in her mind. She could hear the distant laughter of cadets in the halls, plotting, scheming, confident in their superiority. She smiled faintly. They had no idea. Every movement, every plan they made was already accounted for. The quiet girl who had seemed fragile and unassuming was ready. And when the time came, she would reveal just how wrong they had been. The evening air in Blackridge Military Academy was heavy with anticipation. Shadows stretched across the dormitory halls, and the faint scent of freshly cut grass lingered from the afternoon drills. In the senior cadets' common area, Brooks and his clique whispered eagerly, plotting their next move. Their target was clear: Maya Torres, the quiet new girl who had outperformed and outlasted them at every challenge of the day. The group exchanged glances, each boy trying to outdo the others in devising the perfect humiliation. "She thinks she's better than us," Brooks muttered, his voice tight with frustration. "Tonight we'll put her in her place. No one outlasts me on my watch." The other cadets nodded, eager to see the timid girl they had dismissed as weak face her so-called initiation. Their plan was simple: lure her to the storage facility known among cadets as the Cage, an old obstacle course shed long abandoned by the academy, then lock her inside. Phones would record the entire ordeal, creating a viral moment among the cadets. Meanwhile, Maya was in her room, quietly observing her surroundings. From her bed, she watched shadows move along the halls through a slightly open window. Her tactical watch silently tracked movement patterns, who was where, when, and how they coordinated. She had noticed unusual whispers and hurried footsteps earlier in the day, the subtle indication of a trap forming. Maya's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. This was exactly what she had anticipated. Patience, she had learned, was often the most powerful weapon. Let them make their move. Let them overreach. As the night deepened, the cadets moved into position. Brooks took the lead, signaling his group with a quick hand gesture. The rest of the clique fanned out, creating a web of observation points around the path leading to the Cage. Their excitement was palpable. To them, Maya was still just a timid girl, one they could easily corner and humiliate. Every detail was planned: which doors to lock, the order of commands, and even which cadets would record the victory video. They were meticulous, confident, and dangerously blind to the reality of who they were dealing with. Maya left her room quietly, her footsteps soft against the polished floor. She moved with deliberate calm, noting the cadets' patrol patterns and memorizing their positions. She didn't rush. Her presence was subtle, almost ghost-like, as if she were simply another shadow passing unnoticed. Every motion, every breath was controlled. She could feel the trap forming around her, the tightness of their plan, and yet she walked willingly into the situation. For Maya, this was not a risk, it was an opportunity. Every action she observed tonight would serve as evidence, and if necessary, as leverage. The first contact came at the far end of the dormitory corridor. A cadet leaned casually against the wall, smirking. "Lost again, new girl," he whispered, barely audible but enough to let her know the net was closing. Maya paused, measured, her gaze meeting his for a fraction of a second. There was no fear, only awareness. Her hand brushed lightly against the wall, checking angles and escape routes. In a few steps, she continued on, her calm demeanor masking the awareness of every hidden observer. She could almost hear the anticipatory whispers of the cadets behind her, each thinking themselves clever and unseen. By the time she reached the path leading to the cage, the trap was complete. Cadets were stationed at strategic points, blocking easy exit routes. Phones were raised, recording every shadowed movement. Brooks stepped forward, his grin wide, eyes gleaming with the certainty of victory. "Here you are," he said mockingly. "Right on schedule. We were starting to think you'd hide all night." His tone carried that dangerous mix of humor and threat, the signature arrogance of a cadet who had always ruled through intimidation. Maya stopped a few feet from him, standing tall despite the dim light. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she said calmly. Her voice carried easily in the corridor, low and precise. She didn't move further, letting the cadets approach. Brooks' grin faltered slightly, though he masked it with laughter. He gestured for the others to move in. "Come on, let's finish this quickly. The new girl needs to learn the rules of Blackridge." The cadets lunged, shoving her lightly as she stepped into the storage shed. They slammed the door behind her, locking it quickly. Laughter erupted outside as phones captured the scene, triumphant shouts echoing down the hall. Maya leaned back against the wall, appearing intimidated, checking the lock briefly. But her eyes, calm and focused, scanned the room. She noted the walls, the roof supports, and even the old ventilation ducts. Every element of the trap was catalogued. Every weakness, every structural detail, every angle that could allow for escape was analyzed in seconds. Brooks' group continued laughing outside, exchanging high fives and teasing Maya through the small window. "How's it feel now, huh?" one cadet shouted. "This is what happens when you think you're better than us." Maya said nothing. She didn't panic. She simply assessed her surroundings with the quiet, cold efficiency of someone who had faced far greater threats than adolescent arrogance. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, steady her posture, and plan the next move. Every detail they had assumed worked in their favor was now working against them in her calculations. The minutes stretched on, filled with the sound of muffled voices and faint laughter. The cadets were growing comfortable, confident that their plan had succeeded. They had underestimated Maya completely, and in doing so, they had created the perfect environment for her to demonstrate precisely why she should never be underestimated. From her vantage point, Maya could almost anticipate every action they might take, every move intended to harass or intimidate her further. She smiled faintly, an almost imperceptible gesture, as she prepared for the moment when the illusion of their victory would shatter. Inside the cage, Maya's preparation was meticulous. She tested the door handle quietly, listening for the faintest creak in the lock mechanism. She shifted her weight subtly, stretching her legs and checking the floorboards for stability. Each movement was precise, practiced, almost meditative. The cadets outside believed they had captured a frightened, inexperienced girl. In reality, Maya was cataloging every element of their trap and mentally rehearsing the steps she would take to escape, immobilize the threat, and turn the situation entirely in her favor. By the time the first hour passed, the cadets had grown careless. Some leaned on walls, others checked their phones for updates, their laughter more casual, their movements more predictable. Maya's eyes flicked from shadow to shadow, noting their positions, timing, and even small gestures that revealed which cadet was most likely to make the first misstep. Everything was falling into place. The trap was theirs by design, but the outcome, as Maya had planned, would belong to her. She allowed herself a slow, quiet smile. Patience had its reward. The night outside grew colder, the shadows longer. Inside, Maya Torres stood ready, the calm eye in the storm of adolescent arrogance. She had been underestimated from the start, dismissed as timid and inexperienced. Now every move, every mistake, every underestimation would be a part of their undoing. The trap was set, not for her to fail, but for them to discover, too late, the truth. The quiet new girl they thought they could dominate was far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. The shadows of the storage shed stretched long under the flickering light of a single overhead bulb. Maya Torres stood inside the cramped room, leaning casually against the cool metal wall, though her calm posture masked the meticulous calculations running through her mind. Every corner, every lock, every potential point of entry and exit had already been catalogued. To the cadets outside, she was trapped, alone and vulnerable. They laughed, whispered, and tapped their phones, convinced that their victory was complete. "Get out of here," Brooks shouted through the small barred window, a hint of menace in his voice. "We warned you. Now you're learning your place." The other cadets snickered, one of them nudging a door hinge to demonstrate how secure it was. They had believed without a doubt that Maya would panic, that she would fumble or beg for release. But she remained still, serene, as if the shouting and posturing were nothing more than background noise. Maya allowed herself a faint smile, almost imperceptible, as she crouched slightly to inspect the door more closely. She tested the locking mechanism, pressing and twisting with the quiet precision of someone who had spent years dismantling far more complex systems. Every second she spent here was an observation, every movement recorded in her mind. Her ears picked up the faintest change in cadence from the laughing cadets outside, the subtle shift in Brooks' breathing, the whispered reassurance from one of his friends. They were careless, overconfident, predictable. With a soft click, the first lock disengaged. Maya's hands moved swiftly and quietly, her fingers tracing the hidden mechanism with practiced efficiency. Another twist, another subtle adjustment, and the second lock yielded. The door that had seemed impenetrable to adolescent cadets opened silently under her skilled touch. For an instant, she paused, listening to the muffled laughter and chatter beyond the walls. Every move the cadets made outside had reinforced her awareness. They thought they had power, but it was an illusion. She stepped out cautiously, feet soundless against the worn wooden floor. The small window showed Brooks packing impatiently, unaware of her escape. Maya stayed low, moving through the shadows as though she were part of the night itself. The cadets, too engaged in mocking her earlier, were entirely unaware of the presence moving just beyond their line of sight. Brooks' group assumed their trap had succeeded. They were wrong. As she emerged from the shed, the scent of damp earth and fresh grass hit her senses. She paused, scanning the field with calm precision. Her eyes locked onto Brooks and his clique, still laughing and celebrating their supposed triumph. Maya's voice, when it came, was low and controlled, carrying a weight that immediately drew attention. "Line up," she said, almost casually. The command was simple, yet it reverberated with authority. Cadets froze mid-laugh, unsure if she was joking. Brooks turned, squinting. "What? How did?" he began, his voice cracking with disbelief. Maya did not answer. She moved forward, each step deliberate, a subtle demonstration of control. In a matter of seconds, she had closed the distance between herself and the nearest cadet, applying a precise, non-lethal seal technique that immobilized him before he even registered the movement. Shock rippled through the group. One by one, she disabled the others with movements so controlled they barely realized what had happened. The field, once filled with laughter and mockery, fell silent except for the quiet, controlled breathing of Maya Torres. Brooks, the self-assured cadet commander, stared wide-eyed. His smug expression faltered, replaced by confusion, fear, and finally recognition. He tried to assert authority, to laugh it off, but every instinct he relied on failed him. Maya's calm dominance was undeniable. Every gesture, every step, every word was infused with experience and lethal precision, the result of years in environments far more dangerous than a military academy prank. When instructors finally arrived, drawn by the commotion, they were met with a scene of stunned cadets immobilized in positions that suggested careful training rather than struggle. Brooks attempted to explain, stammering over his words, but Maya's presence silenced him. Slowly, deliberately, she removed the temporary cadet badge she had been wearing, revealing the identity she had concealed all day. Lieutenant Maya Torres, U.S. Navy SEAL, stared calmly at the group. Recognition spread among the instructors instantly, and the cadets' expressions shifted from defiance to horror. Maya's voice, low but authoritative, filled the air. "I was sent here to observe the culture of this academy. Hazing, bullying, intimidation, these behaviors have no place here." Her eyes swept across the group, nodding guilt, fear, and disbelief. "You assumed your power over me. You assumed weakness where there was none, and you will now face the consequences of those assumptions." Each word was precise, deliberate, carrying weight far beyond the mere threat of punishment. The cadets, particularly Brooks, struggled to comprehend what had just happened. The girl they had mocked, trapped, and humiliated was not only their superior in training, but an elite operative whose experience dwarfed anything they could imagine. The dynamic that had existed for hours, the hierarchy, the arrogance, the perceived superiority, had been shattered in moments by someone they had completely underestimated. Maya continued, outlining the Academy's expectations and the consequences of continued intimidation. She didn't raise her voice unnecessarily, didn't act theatrically. She simply stated the facts, her presence commanding attention and respect. The cadets were forced to listen, their previous bravado stripped away. Each subtle gesture reinforced the reality. She was no ordinary cadet. She had already won the psychological battle simply by existing in the space and moving with control and confidence. After a tense few minutes, the instructors began taking statements, separating cadets for questioning, and reviewing recordings from the field. Maya stepped back, allowing the Academy's authority structure to resume control, but her eyes never left Brooks and his group. She had made her point, but the memory of her presence would linger long after the incident. The cadets would remember the night they thought they had power and discovered the quiet new girl was far stronger than they could have imagined. Finally, as the field cleared and the cadets returned to their dormitories under supervision, Maya allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had anticipated every move, used patience and observation to her advantage, and demonstrated skill without unnecessary force. Her mission was far from over. There would be investigations, consequences, and more observations, but she had established authority and sent a clear message. In a place dominated by arrogance and bullying, she had become a force impossible to ignore. As she returned to her dorm room that night, the events replayed in her mind not with fear or excitement, but with satisfaction. She had survived the first true test, observed the depth of the Academy's toxicity, and demonstrated the consequences of underestimating someone with experience and skill. The cadets outside, meanwhile, would whisper the story of the quiet girl who walked into a trap and walked out a master of control. Maya lay on her bed, reviewing the day's events, mentally cataloging every behavior and reaction she had witnessed. She knew the real work was only beginning. The trap tonight had been just a preview, a small taste of the lessons she would impart. But the impression was already indelible. The new girl was no ordinary cadet, and those who assumed otherwise would pay the price for their arrogance. Outside, the moon cast shadows over the Blackridge grounds, silent witnesses to the shift in balance. Within those shadows, Maya Torres, calm, composed, lethal, rested only for a moment before planning for the days ahead. She was still an observer, still undercover, still gathering intelligence. But now she had also become a living reminder that appearances could deceive, and that patience, skill, and precision would always prevail. The field at Blackridge Military Academy was silent, save for the rustle of leaves and the faint hum of distant lights. Brooks and his clique stood frozen, disbelief etched on every face. The girl they had cornered, locked, and ridiculed now stood among them, not merely free but in command. Her movements were fluid, deliberate, and precise. She wasn't running. She wasn't panicking. She was observing, calculating, waiting. Maya's eyes swept across the group, nodding their body language, tension, and unspoken fear. Each breath, each slight movement told her volumes. These cadets, confident only moments ago, now realized their misjudgment. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and they were utterly unprepared. Brooks stepped forward, trying to mask his terror with bravado. "Wait, what? How did you?" His words faltered as Maya's calm gaze met his. There was no malice, no anger. There was only control, the unmistakable command presence of someone who had been trained to dominate situations without shouting. The rest of the cadets shuffled uneasily, unsure whether to approach, retreat, or protest. Every instinct they relied on failed in the presence of her quiet authority. Without warning, Maya moved. In a blur of motion, she approached the nearest cadet, applying a non-lethal but precise immobilization technique she had practiced countless times in training. The boy went rigid, then slack, and fell lightly to the ground. The others gasped, their confidence cracking. Another cadet attempted to step forward to help, but Maya's eyes shifted toward him, and he froze mid-step. With a subtle adjustment of her stance and a small, practiced push, he too was immobilized, leaving only Brooke standing. Shock rippled through the field. Laughter, the dominant sound just moments ago, had vanished. The cadets' phones clattered to the ground in surprise, their hands frozen over the devices they had intended to use to mock her. It became painfully clear. The girl they thought they could control was not only capable of defending herself but controlling the situation entirely. Their arrogance had blinded them, and now the consequences were immediate and undeniable. Brooks, regaining some semblance of composure, attempted to act. "Hey, this isn't funny," he shouted, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. He lunged forward, perhaps hoping sheer bravado could reclaim some of the lost authority. Maya's response was calm, measured, and efficient. A single, precise movement brought him to a halt, a controlled yet non-harmful restraint that left him suspended in place for several seconds. The rest of the cadets watched, frozen in awe and disbelief. Her presence alone, even without physical action, commanded the field. Brooks' usual smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by confusion and dawning respect. He realized too late that his assumptions had been catastrophic. Every joke, every shove, every plan had underestimated Maya's abilities. She didn't need to raise her voice or escalate violence. Her confidence, her controlled movements, and her awareness of their weaknesses spoke louder than any words could. Finally she spoke, her voice low but carrying effortlessly across the field. "You assumed dominance over me because you thought I was weak. That assumption was your first mistake." Her tone was calm, but the cadets understood the weight behind it. Each word was deliberate, precise, and resonant with authority. "Every action you took tonight was observed. Every insult, every shove, every attempt to humiliate me has been recorded. Your reckoning has begun." The cadets exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who had not directly participated felt the weight of her words. Maya's presence had shifted the balance of power completely. Where once they had laughed, now fear and uncertainty dominated. For the first time, the supposed alpha cadets were acutely aware of their vulnerability. And for the first time, they realized that strength wasn't measured in size, loudness, or arrogance. It was measured in control, precision, and calculated action. As she continued, Maya demonstrated the next level of her command. With fluid, controlled movements, she directed the immobilized cadets into positions along the edge of the training field, ensuring they could not flee or regroup. The act was calm, deliberate, and methodical, yet it sent a clear message. Disobedience or resistance would be met with immediate, precise consequences. The cadets' minds raced. They had never experienced authority like this, so confident and unobtrusive, yet unmistakably absolute. Brooks, still the last standing, swallowed hard. Who are you really?" he demanded, a tremor betraying his nervousness. Maya paused, her gaze steady. Slowly, deliberately, she removed the temporary cadet badge she had been wearing. Beneath it was the unmistakable identification of a Navy SEAL officer, Lieutenant Maya Torres. Recognition spread instantly among the cadets, a mix of awe, fear, and disbelief replacing the earlier smugness. The scales had tipped entirely. The cadets had been prepared to intimidate a weak girl. Instead, they had confronted someone whose training and authority far exceeded their understanding. They had assumed power. They had assumed dominance. And they had been utterly wrong. Maya's calm efficiency had dismantled their hierarchy in minutes, leaving them shocked and humbled. Even Brooks, the most arrogant, was forced to reconsider every assumption he had ever made about appearances, strength, and competence. By now, instructors arrived on the field, alerted by the commotion and the immobilized cadets. Their eyes widened as they saw the scene. Cadets restrained with precision, unmoved by struggle, and standing silently as Maya's calm authority filled the air. The instructors, surprised, quickly shifted to recognition, as they realized the identity of the operative among them. Maya's training and experience had ensured that the field was safe, controlled, and fully dominated without unnecessary escalation. Maya addressed the instructors directly, outlining the sequence of events and emphasizing the issues of hazing, bullying, and intimidation. The cadets watched, stunned, as their supposed victim not only defended herself but instructed the adults on the severity of the situation. Brooks' confidence crumbled entirely, replaced by an understanding that the consequences would be severe. And as Maya's voice continued to resonate with authority, the lesson extended far beyond the immediate group. No one should ever assume dominance over another, and arrogance could be swiftly corrected with skill and composure. Once the cadets were released under supervision and instructed to recount their actions, Maya stepped back slightly, allowing the Academy's authority to assume responsibility. Yet even in retreat, her presence lingered in the minds of those who had faced her. Every movement, every calculated restraint, every word spoken had left an indelible impression. The new girl was no longer a newcomer. She had become a symbol of precise, controlled power that could not be underestimated. Later that night, as Maya returned to her dorm room, she reflected on the events. Every detail had unfolded as she anticipated. The trap, the overconfidence, the sequence of mistakes by Brooks and his clique. She had remained calm, observed, and acted with precision. More importantly, she had sent a message, not just to those involved, but to the entire Academy, that intimidation, arrogance, and cruelty had consequences. In her silent, measured way, she had reclaimed authority and established her presence definitively. Maya lay on her bed, reviewing the day's events in her journal. Every movement, every reaction, every mistake by the cadets was carefully recorded, cataloged for future action. She knew this was only the beginning. The cadets would now approach every interaction differently, forever altered by the events of tonight. And while her mission remained covert, her presence had already changed the culture of the Academy in subtle but powerful ways. The quiet girl they had tried to trap was now the master of control, and the memory of her efficiency and composure would linger long after she left the field. Outside, the moon cast shadows across the Academy grounds. The night was silent, but in every dorm, every hallway, and every training space, the story of Maya Torres, the girl who had walked into a trap and emerged in complete control, was being whispered. She had transformed from a quiet newcomer into a figure of authority and awe, demonstrating that patience, observation, and skill could easily overcome arrogance and intimidation. By the time the instructors arrived at the training field, the situation had already shifted completely. The group of cadets who had intended to humiliate Maya Torres stood immobilized or frozen in place, a mixture of shock, fear, and disbelief etched across their faces. The night air carried a tense silence, broken only by Maya's calm, controlled breathing as she surveyed the group, her posture exuding authority without aggression. The students had expected to dominate her, to assert power over a seemingly weak newcomer. Instead, the reverse had occurred in dramatic fashion. Brooks, the cadet commander, stood nearest the front of the group, trying to collect his thoughts, but his usual bravado had vanished. His chest heaved slightly with the effort of remaining composed, though every small movement betrayed his panic. The instructors approached cautiously, noticing the unusual alignment of cadets and the absence of physical struggle. One of the senior staff raised an eyebrow and asked, "What exactly happened here?" Maya's calm voice answered, carrying over the quiet murmur of disbelief. "I was placed in a situation intended to intimidate and humiliate me," she said, each word precise, deliberate, and measured. "Cadets assumed dominance over me based on perceived weakness. Every action, every attempt to trap and provoke, was observed and documented. The cadets acted in violation of the Academy's policies on harassment and hazing." Her gaze swept across the group, lingering on Brooks and his closest followers. "I am here to assess and correct such behaviors before they escalate further." Murmurs rippled through the instructors and nearby cadets alike. Maya's identification, still concealed until this moment, now became evident as she removed the temporary cadet badge covering her uniform insignia. Beneath it gleamed the markings of a Navy SEAL officer, Lieutenant Maya Torres. Recognition spread instantly among the staff. Whispers of awe and astonishment rippled through the group as everyone began to understand the magnitude of what had just occurred. Brooks' jaw dropped. Yura, he began, but Maya cut him off with a steady glance. There was no need for shouting. The control in her posture and voice silenced him. Lieutenant Torres, he finally stammered, his previous confidence replaced by a raw mixture of fear and awe. He realized that his assumptions had been catastrophic. The girl he believed could be humiliated and trapped had not only turned the tables but had done so with precision, calm, and authority far beyond his comprehension. Maya continued, now addressing both the instructors and the cadets with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. This academy must foster respect, discipline, and teamwork. Hazing and bullying undermine the core values we are trying to instill. Your actions tonight demonstrated a dangerous combination of arrogance and cruelty. These behaviors have consequences. She paused, letting her words sink in. Every cadet present, particularly Brooks, felt the weight of her presence. The instructors began taking statements immediately, separating cadets to record their accounts. Some of the cadets, still shaking, tried to explain their actions, but their words faltered in the face of Maya's calm authority. Every move she had made that evening had been deliberate and professional, leaving no room for interpretation or excuse. The cadets' earlier triumph, celebrating what they thought was a successful trap, had been replaced by the crushing reality that their assumptions were completely wrong. One of the instructors asked for a demonstration of how Maya had handled the situation. Without hesitation, she moved through the positions of the cadets, explaining in precise, deliberate detail how she had neutralized each individual using non-lethal techniques. Her movements were controlled, efficient, and professional, demonstrating skill far beyond the average cadet's comprehension. The cadets who had attempted to mock her now watched in silent astonishment. Every step, every gesture, and every command reinforced the truth. Maya Torres was not to be underestimated. Brooks, still reeling, tried to defend himself. "We didn't know she seemed just a regular new cadet," he protested weakly. Maya turned her gaze on him, the calmness of her eyes a stark contrast to the panic in his voice. "You assumed weakness where there was none," she said softly. "Your arrogance blinded you. That assumption could have been costly if this were a real operational scenario. Learning to assess people accurately and act with discipline is critical. Tonight, you learned that lesson the hard way." The staff nodded in agreement. They were impressed, not only by Maya's control of the situation, but by the clarity with which she addressed the behavioral issues within the cadet body. It became immediately clear that this was more than a simple disciplinary issue. It was an educational moment. Hazing, intimidation, and bullying had to be addressed systematically, and Maya's intervention provided the perfect framework. In the following hour, the cadets who had orchestrated the trap were escorted to separate rooms for further questioning and reflection. Brooks, pale and shaken, finally seemed to understand the scope of the situation. His arrogance had led him to underestimate Maya completely. Every miscalculation, every assumption, every laugh at her perceived weakness had reinforced her awareness, and now he was facing the consequences. Meanwhile, other cadets began to murmur among themselves, discussing in hushed tones the unexpected abilities of the new girl who had walked into a trap and emerged completely unscathed. Maya used the opportunity to address the remaining cadets, outlining the academy's expectations and reinforcing the consequences of repeated misconduct. Her calm voice, authoritative but not aggressive, left an indelible impression. Every cadet present understood the shift in power dynamics. The girl they had laughed at, the one they thought weak, had demonstrated superior skill, judgment, and control. The lesson was clear. Arrogance and bullying carried consequences, and mastery and discipline commanded respect. As the night progressed, the instructors formalized the disciplinary actions. Hazing procedures were suspended, new policies regarding mentorship and accountability were emphasized, and the cadets involved were reminded of the gravity of their behavior. Maya remained present, guiding the process with the quiet, confident efficiency that had characterized her entire evening. The cadets, still stunned, had to confront the reality of the situation. Their social dominance had been entirely dismantled by someone they had assumed powerless. By the end of the night, Maya returned to her dorm quietly. She reflected on the events, reviewing her observations in a journal she kept for both tactical and behavioral notes. She had documented every action, every reaction, every subtle behavioral cue of Brooks and his clique. These notes would not only serve for academy records, but would also be critical in shaping future leadership programs. Her presence had already begun to change the academy's culture. Even as she prepared to rest, Maya knew the impression she had made would resonate far beyond the immediate evening. The cadets would remember the new girl who walked into a trap and took control, not through aggression, but through calm, precise action. Her training, experience, and authority had demonstrated that appearances were deceptive, that assumptions could be fatal, and that skill and discipline were the ultimate form of power. Outside, the academy grounds were quiet. The field, once filled with laughter and scheming, was now empty, the shadows long and undisturbed. But within the dormitories, within the cadets' minds, the story of the night lived on. They had witnessed firsthand the consequences of underestimating someone and the power of quiet, precise control. Maya Torres had not only revealed her identity as a Navy SEAL, but had fundamentally altered the balance of respect, authority, and discipline within Blackridge Military Academy. Her mission for the evening complete, Maya lay on her bed, reflecting calmly. The trap had been sprung, the cadets had learned their lessons, and the academy had witnessed the true consequences of arrogance. Yet she knew her work was far from over. There would be follow-ups, guidance, and continued observation. But tonight, the lesson had been delivered, unmistakably and permanently. The quiet new girl was not only capable of surviving a trap, but of turning it into a demonstration of absolute control. The morning after the dramatic events at Blackridge Military Academy, the atmosphere across the campus had shifted. Where once the halls were filled with whispered schemes and nervous laughter, there was now a cautious respect that hung in the air like an invisible force. Cadets walked a little straighter, spoke a little quieter, and observed one another more carefully. The night's events had left a profound impression, one that could not be ignored. Brooks, still pale from the revelation of Maya Torres' true identity, shuffled down the hall, head lowered. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by a tentative awareness. He had spent the night replaying every moment, every mistake, every arrogant assumption he had made. The girl he had tried to trap had not only bested him physically, but had dismantled his confidence entirely. It was a humbling realization, and one that forced reflection. Across campus, other cadets whispered among themselves, recounting the events of the previous evening. "Did you see her move?" one said, eyes wide with awe. "She didn't even raise her voice and we were frozen." Another nodded, shoving hands into pockets nervously. "I think I underestimated her. Everyone underestimated her." These conversations weren't just gossip. They were the beginnings of a cultural shift. Maya's actions had created a ripple effect, forcing cadets to reconsider their behavior, their assumptions, and their approach to leadership. Maya herself arrived early to the training grounds, her presence calm but commanding. Today's schedule was different. She would not simply observe. She had been asked to provide guidance, mentorship, and insight into the qualities that had allowed her to handle the trap with such precision. Cadets gathered around, some hesitant, others eager, but all attentive. The energy was different. Curiosity replaced arrogance, respect replaced mockery. "Good morning," Maya said, her voice measured, calm, and authoritative. "Yesterday demonstrated one crucial point. Assumptions are dangerous. Strength isn't measured by intimidation, loudness, or physical dominance. Strength is measured by awareness, precision, and discipline. Anyone can appear strong, but true skill is revealed under pressure." She paused, scanning the group. "Leadership is not about fear. It's about respect earned through competence and integrity." Brooks swallowed hard, shifting uncomfortably. Maya's gaze lingered on him, not accusatory but observant. She wasn't here to shame him personally, but to teach a lesson that he and the other cadets would not forget. Slowly, he nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. Others mirrored his response, their earlier confidence tempered by the memory of their mistakes. Maya's authority had extended beyond physical skill. It now commanded their intellectual and emotional attention. The day's exercises began with teamwork drills designed to test strategy and cooperation. Maya observed silently at first, noting who stepped up naturally, who faltered under pressure, and who attempted to dominate without listening. Cadets approached the tasks differently than they had the day before. They worked together, communicated carefully, and resisted the urge to intimidate or belittle one another. Even minor failures were met with constructive dialogue rather than ridicule. The transformation was subtle but profound. During a complex obstacle course exercise, Maya demonstrated techniques for navigating challenges efficiently, showing cadets how to combine strength, balance, and observation. She moved with a quiet precision that immediately drew attention. Every movement was deliberate, calculated, and efficient, yet executed with a fluid grace that made the task seem almost effortless. The cadets watched intently, taking mental notes, understanding not only the physical aspects but the strategic thinking behind each action. At one point, Brooks attempted a shortcut, hopping to regain a sense of control. Maya stopped him gently but firmly. "Your success isn't measured by finishing first," she explained. "It's measured by doing it correctly with awareness and with integrity. Taking shortcuts undermines the mission and the team. Leadership is not about speed, it's about judgment." Brooks flushed, realizing that the lesson was not just about physical performance but ethical and tactical responsibility. By mid-afternoon, Maya had moved from observation to active mentorship. She gathered small groups and offered one-on-one guidance, highlighting each cadet's strengths and weaknesses. Her approach was not punitive but instructive. Mistakes were reframed as learning opportunities. Arrogance was corrected with subtle but firm guidance, and teamwork was reinforced through practical exercises. The cadets, once focused on social dominance, were now learning humility, discipline, and precision. Conversations among the cadets reflected the change. "I never realized how much I assumed things about people," one whispered to a friend. "She saw every move I made before I even made it," another nodded. "It's not just about physical skill, it's about thinking, planning, paying attention." The lessons Maya imparted went beyond drills and obstacles. They touched the cadets' perception of leadership, confidence, and respect. As the day drew to a close, the Academy's senior staff gathered with Maya to discuss the long-term implications. They recognized that the events of the previous night, combined with her mentorship, had already begun to shift the culture of Blackridge. Hazing practices were being reconsidered, team exercises were being restructured, and cadets were starting to approach each other with greater mindfulness. Maya's influence was clear. Her presence alone had instilled a new standard of accountability and respect. In the final exercise, Maya paired cadets together to navigate a complex simulated mission. The task required cooperation, trust, and tactical thinking. Cadets who had previously relied on intimidation now relied on communication and observation. Brooks, though still humbled by the previous night's events, led his team cautiously but effectively, demonstrating that he had internalized some of the lessons. Success was no longer about ego, it was about strategy and awareness. As sunset bathed the campus in a golden glow, Maya gathered the cadets for a debrief. "Today demonstrated how much we can accomplish when assumptions are set aside," she said. "Leadership is not inherited, it is earned through awareness, skill, and respect. Every decision, every action carries consequences, whether immediate or long-term. Your ability to recognize this defines the type of leader you will become." The cadets absorbed her words in silence, the gravity of her experience settling over them. Brooks, reflecting privately later, realized how much he had learned. Humility, patience, and observation were not just theoretical concepts, they were survival skills, skills that had been demonstrated to him in stark reality. The girl he had underestimated was now a mentor, not just in tactics but in character, leadership, and discipline. He would never view authority or skill in the same way again. By nightfall, the academy had settled into an unusual quiet. Cadets returned to their dorms with a new understanding of power and responsibility. Maya, once a mysterious newcomer, had become a figure of authority, a teacher of lessons that transcended physical skill. Her presence had reshaped the environment, showing that true leadership combined competence, awareness, and respect for others. Outside, the moon rose high over the academy, casting silver light across the campus. The events of the week had left a lasting impression. Cadets whispered stories of the girl who had walked into a trap and turned it into a lesson in mastery and authority. Brooks and his clique, humbled but enlightened, began the slow process of earning back trust and respect. And in the shadows, Maya Torres, calm, disciplined, and observant, continued her mission, knowing that the seeds of leadership she had planted would grow long after she had left the academy grounds. The lessons of the night, combined with the mentorship of the following day, had set a new standard. Blackridge Military Academy would never forget the quiet new girl who turned arrogance into opportunity, a girl whose experience, precision, and calm authority had transformed both cadets and culture alike. Weeks had passed since the night Maya Torres had turned a trap into a lesson in precision and control. Blackridge Military Academy had settled into a new rhythm, yet the echoes of that night continued to reverberate throughout the halls. Cadets who had once relied on intimidation now moved with cautious respect. Social hierarchies had shifted, not because fear dominated, but because competence and discipline had earned genuine respect. Maya's presence had permanently altered the academy's culture. Brooks, once the self-assured leader of the senior clique, walked through the training grounds with a noticeable change in posture. His head no longer bobbed with arrogance but held steady, reflecting focus and awareness. The lessons he had learned from Maya had not been superficial. He approached teamwork exercises differently, sought advice from others, and even acknowledged mistakes openly. The process of rebuilding trust and respect with his peers was challenging, but the humility he had acquired promised to make him a stronger, more thoughtful leader in the long run. The other cadets mirrored similar transformations. Conversations that once teetered on mockery or exclusion now revolved around strategy, awareness, and mutual support. The incident with Maya had forced them to confront their assumptions, recognize the dangers of arrogance, and reevaluate the meaning of leadership. Her influence extended beyond tactical instruction. She had imparted lessons in psychology, respect, and the consequences of underestimating others. The academy was evolving, slowly but irrevocably, under her subtle guidance. Maya herself had continued her mission with quiet diligence. Though she remained officially undercover, her role expanded from observer to mentor and instructor. Cadets sought her advice on teamwork, tactical exercises, and leadership challenges. Her calm, measured responses guided them, never condescending but always precise. She demonstrated that true authority was not about intimidation or display. It was about control, observation, and the ability to act decisively when necessary. One afternoon, Maya gathered the cadets who had orchestrated the trap for a reflective exercise. There was no punishment in the traditional sense. This was a lesson in accountability, not vengeance. The events of that night were more than a test of physical skill, she explained. They were a test of judgment, patience, and perception. Leadership requires more than strength or dominance. It requires awareness, discipline, and respect for others. Mistakes are opportunities for growth, but arrogance is a liability. The cadets listened attentively, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Brooks spoke quietly, acknowledging the errors in his behavior. I didn't realize how much I assumed," he said. "I thought I knew everything about the situation, but I didn't see anything clearly." Maya nodded approvingly. "Recognizing assumptions is the first step in correcting them," she said. "True leadership begins with honesty with oneself, followed by integrity in action." In the weeks that followed, Maya introduced structured exercises designed to reinforce these principles. Cadets worked in pairs and small groups, focusing on observation, strategic thinking, and cooperative problem-solving. She provided real-time feedback, highlighting both effective and ineffective behaviors. The emphasis was never on humiliation or dominance but on awareness, adaptation, and accountability. Slowly, cadets began to internalize these lessons, incorporating them into their everyday interactions. The academy staff observed the shift with approval. Hazing incidents sharply declined, and camaraderie among cadets increased. Maya's influence had gone beyond instruction. It had instilled a new standard of behavior, one grounded in respect and competence. Even the more senior cadets who had previously relied on fear to maintain control began adjusting their approach, realizing that leadership was earned, not imposed. Brooks, in particular, became a case study in transformation. He worked diligently to regain credibility with his peers, guided by Maya's mentorship. His leadership style evolved from one based on intimidation to one that emphasized strategy, observation, and cooperation. He began to understand that respect and authority were cultivated through action and example, not through fear. This internal shift reflected the true impact of Maya's intervention. Not only had she demonstrated skill, but she had inspired growth in those who once opposed her. The cadets began referring to Maya with quiet reverence, not as an untouchable authority figure, but as a mentor whose lessons could guide them toward their own potential. Her presence became a symbol of the academy's evolving culture, a living reminder that skill, precision, and calm authority could achieve far more than arrogance or brute force. Even those who had never directly interacted with her had heard the stories, observed the changes, and internalized the lessons she imparted. One evening, as the sun set over the Blackridge campus, Maya walked alone along the training field. She reflected on the journey so far, the trap, the confrontation, the revelations, and the transformation she had facilitated. The cadets' growth, the cultural shift, and the reduction of hazing were tangible results of her efforts, yet she knew the work was ongoing. Leadership was not a static quality. It required continual observation, reflection, and adaptation. As she paused, she noticed Brooks and his team conducting exercises with precision and focus. There was no arrogance, no posturing, only disciplined effort and cooperative strategy. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The seed had been planted. The harvest was beginning. These cadets would carry the lessons forward, influencing not only their peers but the next generation of cadets who would arrive at Blackridge in the years to come. Maya's reputation quietly spread beyond her immediate circle. Staff members began consulting her for guidance on curriculum development, tactical exercises, and leadership training. Her presence was no longer solely as an observer or undercover mentor. It had become integral to the academy's operations. Her influence extended beyond a single incident. It was shaping the culture and the future of Blackridge Military Academy itself. The cadets, meanwhile, began to internalize a fundamental truth. Respect is earned, not assumed. Skill must be demonstrated under pressure, and arrogance is a liability that can be exploited by even the quietest observer. The memory of Maya Torres, the girl they once tried to trap, remained vivid, a reminder that assumptions could be dangerous and that calm, precise action would always command authority. Brooks, now a changed cadet, approached Maya one afternoon with humility. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for showing us the right way. I've learned more in the past few weeks than I realized I needed to." Maya regarded him calmly, her expression neutral but approving. "Remember," she said, "growth is ongoing. What you do with the lessons you've learned defines who you become. Lead with integrity, and you'll never be caught unprepared." As the academy prepared for the next training cycle, Maya's legacy was firmly established. The new girl who had walked into a trap had become a mentor, an authority, and a symbol of calm, precise leadership. Her influence persisted in the halls, in the minds of cadets, and in the standards by which the academy would operate. Hazing, arrogance, and assumptions were no longer tolerated, not because of fear, but because respect and competence had been demonstrated as the ultimate form of authority. Even as Maya completed her mission and prepared for future assignments, the story of that night remained. Cadets recounted it to new arrivals, instructors referenced it during leadership discussions, and the lessons she had imparted were woven into the fabric of Blackridge. What had begun as a confrontation in a dark shed had evolved into a comprehensive lesson in leadership, integrity, and awareness. The final scene of the Academy's transformation was subtle but undeniable. Cadets moved with confidence tempered by observation. Leaders were chosen for skill and judgment rather than intimidation, and the memory of the quiet new girl who had turned a trap into a masterclass in authority endured. Maya Torres had left her mark, not through force or fear, but through skill, patience, and precise action. She had demonstrated that true strength lies not in aggression, but in mastery, control, and unwavering composure. As the moon rose over Blackridge Military Academy, its silver light touching every corner of the grounds, one fact remained clear. The quiet new girl had rewritten the rules, redefined leadership, and created a lasting legacy. And those who had once underestimated her would carry the lessons of her presence forever.